I think that most people have this idea that if the way to be happy was simple and easily accessible, then everyone would be happy. There wouldn't be so many unhappy people in the world. And so we have this idea that whatever that is, that method, that philosophy, that skill, or whatever it might be, it must be a secret. Because otherwise, everyone would be applying it in their lives. Certainly, we would be applying it in our lives. But the reality is that there really is no secret to happiness. It's actually very simple. But perhaps the problem is that it's so simple that we tend to overlook it. Or perhaps because we're so conditioned to approach happiness from a certain perspective, we reject anything that contradicts that condition. Someone might suggest that to be happy, simply accept everything as it is. And we'll say, I can't do that, give me something else. Okay, to be happy, simply be content with what you already have. And we'll say, I can't do that, give me something else. Okay, to be happy, let go of all expectations and attachments. Are you crazy? I can't do that, give me something else. And so all of these kinds of things we reject. It doesn't fit with our desires and ideals, nor does it fit with our beliefs about happiness and what is required for us to be happy. We want happiness on our terms, and we're so conditioned to believe that happiness comes from someplace outside of us, from external circumstances and objects, or from other people, that we reject any answer that conflicts with this. It doesn't matter if the answer is simple. Maybe we think it's too simple. It can't possibly be that simple. It must be more complicated than that. Even though we don't even try it, even though everything we have tried so far has failed, we're not willing to try something simple. We're not willing to give up our attachments, our wants, our expectations. We're not willing to accept life as it is. We're not willing to simply appreciate and be grateful for what we already have. We want more. It might also be that we don't even know what happiness is. We think we know, but what if our understanding is wrong? That might be a part of the problem, how we define or imagine happiness. For example, many people confuse pleasure with happiness. When we're enjoying something pleasurable, we tend to feel happy in that moment, and so we tend to think that happiness comes from pleasurable experiences. And if that's the case, then in our pursuit of happiness, what we're often pursuing is pleasure. But the problem with pleasure is that it's short-lived. It doesn't last. It's also depreciating. That means if you engage in some pleasurable activity too much, it eventually ceases to be pleasurable. It can even become painful. So when that happens, you have to find something else to engage in. And you have to keep chasing after these experiences, one after the other. But ultimately, there's no lasting satisfaction in any of that, and it can be exhausting, or it can be deeply disappointing, especially if what you desire is not attainable or simply doesn't measure up to your expectations. And so, in our pursuit of happiness, we often wind up deeply unhappy. It would seem that what we're really after is some sense of lasting satisfaction. So could we say that happiness is just another word for satisfaction? And what is satisfaction but to simply be content, to no longer desire, to be at peace with what is? To be content means simply to accept and appreciate where you are and what you already have. And that's it. It doesn't require anything to be different. It doesn't require that we do anything. It doesn't require that we add anything. It simply requires that we let go of the desire for things to be any different. But it's our unwillingness to do that which makes it so complicated. In fact, it's our initial dissatisfaction which causes our unhappiness in the first place. The fact that we don't accept and appreciate what currently is. So if you want to be happy, Simply appreciate what you already have. But then people say, I can't do that because what I have is imperfect or flawed, or I just don't have enough, or there's something missing, or maybe I'm just not going to be happy until I have what I want, or until my circumstances change. That's the way we tend to think, and that's why we're not happy. We say that we want to be happy, but we keep postponing it for when the circumstances are just right, for when we've acquired or accomplished this thing or the other. And in the meantime, we can't simply appreciate where we are and what we have. We think we'll be happy when all of that changes. And unfortunately for many of us, our circumstances don't really change much at all. But even if they do, that doesn't guarantee anything. There are people who do change their circumstances quite significantly, who achieve and acquire all kinds of things, thinking that it's going to make them happy. There are people who are very ambitious, who take initiative to engage in all kinds of pleasurable activities, or accumulate riches, or become famous, and so on. And initially, those kinds of experiences do offer some enjoyment, but that enjoyment is short-lived. And most of those people find themselves in a situation where, having acquired all the things they had desired, they no longer find it fulfilling. It's no longer satisfying, or it's still just not enough, and so you have to keep acquiring more or move on to the next thing. But really, it's not about the circumstances. It's about our mindset, our attitude. And if our attitude is one of dissatisfaction and depreciation, then even when our circumstances change, we take that same mindset with us into the new situation, and there we find more things to be dissatisfied with. It's really that mindset which is the reason why we're so unhappy in the first place. So it's not that there's some big secret, it's just that we don't want to accept the simplicity of it. We're so stuck on the idea that happiness depends on circumstance, on external factors, or what we have or don't have, that we can't see that happiness actually doesn't depend on anything at all. So the reality is this: if you can't be satisfied right now where you currently are with what you currently have, you won't be satisfied in any situation. Because satisfaction has nothing to do with the situation. It has to do with our own perception, how we perceive the situation, how we judge and interpret. Currently, most of us operate from a perspective of looking for flaws, looking for problems, looking for what's missing, and so on. And it's a deeply conditioned habit of thinking. And we imagine that if we could adjust our circumstances in such a way as to resolve those flaws, or to acquire what seems to be missing, and so on, then that would no longer be an issue. But if we have that habit of looking for flaws and imperfections and so on, then we'll always be looking for flaws and imperfections, and we will always find them, no matter what the circumstances. Because no situation is absolutely perfect, and so there's always going to be something that we can find to complain about, to be dissatisfied about. So really, what is needed is a shift in perspective right here, right now, from trying to find everything that's flawed, everything that's missing, and instead look for all the things that are positive about the situation, those things which we can appreciate. And there is plenty that we can be grateful for. We're just not acknowledging it. And I know there are people who will say, yeah, but you don't know how bad I have it. I've got all these problems, or I don't have enough of this or that, or whatever the issue is. But see, that's exactly the attitude that I'm talking about. If you're focusing all of your attention on what's missing, or what's difficult, or what's flawed, and so on, then you're not going to see what's positive about the situation. You're not going to see the opportunities. You're not going to take advantage of what's available to you. And it could be that there's an opportunity there for you to actually change your circumstances in a positive way, but you just don't recognize it. And I'm not suggesting that you ignore all of the negative aspects or pretend as if everything is perfect, but we can be so focused on the negative aspects that we're essentially blinded to the positive ones. The reality is that no situation is perfect. In every situation, there's always some positive and some negative. But the question is, where do you put most of your attention? Because that is what's going to determine your overall emotional state, the overall quality of your life, not the circumstances themselves, but whether we're focused primarily on the positive or the negative. And initially, it can be challenging to shift our perspective because it's so habitual to focus primarily on the negative. We tend to imagine how much better our situation could be, which causes us to feel deeply dissatisfied. So one thing that we can try to do to adjust our perspective is to imagine perhaps how much worse our situation could be. And this is something that you might want to get into a habit of doing whenever you catch yourself complaining about life. Just stop for a moment and consider how much worse it could be. And then realize how good you actually have it. Oftentimes, it's the simplest things that we take for granted. Having a roof over your head and a bed to sleep in, eyes to see and legs to walk on. Things like that we take for granted every day. We overlook all of that because we're so focused on some small imperfection. So be grateful for what you have, because there are people out there who don't have what you have. And I guarantee that no matter how horrible you think your life is, there's someone out there who wishes they had it as good as you do. And if they came into the same circumstances as you, they would be so grateful, they would be so appreciative, and they would be so happy to be in your position. If you find this content valuable, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.